Welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about the unprecedented return of digital piracy, which is something I honestly forgot even existed for so many years once I got hooked on my Netflix subscription. If you rewind the clock just a few years, it really felt like the entertainment industry had finally won. Giants like Netflix, Spotify, and Steam had effectively convinced an entire generation of consumers to put away their torrent clients and happily pay for legal, reliable convenience. But today, the high seas are more crowded than ever. According to global tracking data from Muso, visits to piracy websites have surged to a staggering 216.3 billion annually, with unlicensed streaming completely dominating the landscape and television piracy alone accounting for nearly 97 billion of those visits. In regions like Sweden, up to a quarter of the population admits to actively pirating content. So how did we end up right back where we started? To understand this massive 2026 resurgence, we have to look at how digital piracy originally began, why it practically disappeared, and how sheer corporate greed essentially forced it to return. The story of digital piracy as we know it begins in the late 1990s. The internet was transitioning from a niche academic tool into a household staple, and the invention of the MP3 file format had just revolutionized audio compression, allowing high-fidelity music to be shared over early dial-up and broadband connections. At the time, the recorded music industry was experiencing its most profitable era in human history, peaking at nearly $23 billion in the US in 1999. But their business model was deeply flawed and openly hostile to consumers. If you wanted to listen to one hit song, you were forced to spend $20 on a physical CD packed with filler tracks. Then in 1999, two teenagers launched Napster. It was a revolutionary peer-to-peer file-sharing application that connected millions of users directly to one another's hard drives, effectively aggregating the world's music library into a single search bar for free. The motivation for consumers was incredibly simple. It wasn't just about getting something for nothing, it was a massive technological protest against being price gouged for bundled physical media. The recording industry was caught completely off guard, but instead of adapting to this glaring signal of consumer demand, they went on the aggressive offensive. The Recording Industry Association of America, alongside massive artists like Metallica, launched heavily publicized legal campaigns that successfully sued Napster into oblivion by 2001. But the genie was already out of the bottle. Shutting down a centralized service like Napster merely acted as a catalyst for the creation of decentralized, harder-to-kill alternatives like Kazaa, LimeWire, and eventually the BitTorrent protocol. For a solid decade, a game of digital whack-a-mole ensued, and global recorded music sales shrunk by more than 50% as the piracy generation took over. But then, a miracle happened for the entertainment industry. Piracy didn't die because of lawsuits, billion-dollar fines, or government crackdowns. It faded away because the industry finally surrendered and offered a better alternative. In 2011, Gabe Newell, the co-founder of the Steam PC gaming platform, famously stated, "Piracy is almost always a service problem and not a pricing problem." He argued that if a pirate offers a product globally, instantly, and 24/7 while the legal provider region locks it or delays it by 3 months, the pirate is simply providing a more valuable service. The industry finally listened. Spotify launched and gave us access to almost every song in the world for $10 a month. Netflix offered a massive unified library of television and film without commercials. Steam provided cloud saves, automatic updates, and rich community features. It was safe, it was reasonably priced, and it was infinitely more convenient than hunting for sketchy, malware-infested torrents. As a result, piracy dropped to single-digit percentages of global internet traffic. The service problem was solved, which brings us to the present day. The reason piracy is experiencing a massive, undeniable comeback in 2026 is because the entertainment industry entirely forgot the single lesson that saved them in the first place. They broke the service. When traditional media giants saw the massive valuations of Netflix, they all pulled their intellectual property to launch their own competing, walled-off platforms. Today, the streaming market is an entirely fragmented nightmare. To watch the exact same shows that used to be aggregated on a single platform, consumers are now forced to subscribe to Netflix, Disney+, Max, Paramount+, Apple TV, and Peacock. And the costs have spiraled completely out of control. We are experiencing a global wave of severe subscription fatigue. Over the last few years, prices have skyrocketed. Netflix raised its premium 4K plan to nearly $27 a month while injecting mandatory advertisements into its basic tiers. Prime Video started charging extra just to remove ads from a service users were already paying for. This phenomenon is universally known as enshittification, a process where a platform locks in its user base, steadily degrades the user experience to appease advertisers, and aggressively hikes prices to maximize short-term shareholder profit. The average European household is now spending around £600 a year just to maintain basic video-on-demand subscriptions. But perhaps the biggest catalyst for the 2026 piracy wave is the shattered illusion of digital ownership. For over a decade, digital storefronts used the words buy and purchase, leading consumers to believe they were building permanent digital libraries. But reality came crashing down after a series of corporate revocations. Publisher Ubisoft permanently shut down the servers for its online-only game The Crew, and deleted it directly from user accounts, rendering a purchased product completely defunct. Sony faced massive backlash after announcing it would wipe over 1,000 purchased Discovery Television shows from PlayStation libraries due to expiring licensing agreements. The public finally woke up to the fact that they were paying premium retail prices for temporary rentals. This absolute outrage led to the state of California enacting Assembly Bill 2426, a landmark consumer protection law that took effect on January 1, 2025. This legislation explicitly bans digital storefronts from using the word buy or purchase, unless they clearly and conspicuously disclose to the consumer that they are merely acquiring a temporary revocable license that does not confer true ownership. Digital storefronts globally, including Steam, were forced to update their shopping carts to state that users are only getting a license to access the software, and this sparked a massive, irreversible psychological shift in the consumer base. If buying isn't owning, then pirating isn't stealing. Consumers are returning to piracy not just to save a few dollars, but as a deliberate act of digital preservation, ensuring that the media they love can never be stripped away by an expiring corporate contract or an unannounced server shutdown. This ideological shift is so strong that we're even seeing a massive resurgence in sales of vintage Apple iPods. People are actively abandoning algorithmic streaming to curate locally stored, permanently owned MP3 libraries. In places like Sweden, piracy has even evolved into an official, legally protected religion called copimism, which holds file sharing as a sacred defense of free information. And the tools consumers are using to fight back have evolved exponentially. We aren't in the era of confusing, slow torrent files anymore. Welcome to the era of premium piracy. The 2026 landscape is heavily dominated by combinations like the open-source media player Stremio paired with a service called RealDebrid. RealDebrid is a premium caching service that intercepts torrent files and downloads them to its own massive high-speed servers. This allows users to stream massive, untouched 4K Blu-ray files natively to their smart televisions with zero buffering and absolute privacy. For roughly $3 to $4 a month, users bypass all regional restrictions and access an aggregated, unified library of every movie and show in existence, completely circumventing the fragmented streaming landscape. It is, objectively, a technologically superior service to any legitimate streaming platform on the market today. This exact same technological rebellion is happening in the video game sector, largely driven by extreme consumer hostility toward digital rights management software, specifically the infamous Denuvo anti-tamper. Publishers desperately rely on Denuvo to protect the initial launch window of a game's sales, but the software actively and severely harms the game's performance for legitimate buyers. By wrapping the game in a complex virtual machine and constantly injecting random junk code during gameplay, Denuvo causes severe frame rate drops, input latency, stuttering, and massive CPU caching failures. This creates a paradoxical reality where a paying customer gets a demonstrably worse hardware-taxing experience than a pirate who downloads the cracked version. In response, the gaming piracy community hasn't just continued cracking games, with scene figures like the anonymous hacker Voices 38 successfully breaking modern titles like Doom, The Dark Ages, but they have pioneered entirely new evasion methods like hypervisor gaming. By running their operating system within a highly privileged kernel-level virtual environment, technically savvy pirates can lie to the DRM's hardware checks and bypass Denuvo entirely. This extreme measure allows them to play DRM-infested games flawlessly on day one, proving that invasive anti-piracy software ultimately only punishes the people who actually pay for the product. The conclusion here is inescapable. The entertainment and gaming industries are facing a catastrophic crisis entirely of their own making. They ignored the fundamental truth that convenience, aggregation, and respect for the consumer are the only true antidotes to piracy. By fragmenting media libraries into dozens of walled gardens, skyrocketing subscription prices, degrading user experiences with forced advertisements, integrating performance-killing DRM into games, and legally admitting that digital purchases are nothing more than temporary rentals, these corporate giants have built the ultimate marketing campaign for the high seas. Until the industry unlearns its greed, remembers the lessons of the past, and prioritizes a unified, consumer-friendly service, digital piracy will continue its massive, undisputed reign in 2026 and beyond.